Ji, Daisy Rockwell and Debnita Chakravarti.
Okay, you want to do left and right, or do you want to
How?
be in the middle?
How do you want?
You sit where you want to sit. You like being there.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I need my bag.
Oh, you need your book.
Hello. Good evening. Um, Welcome to this session of the Kolkata Literary Meet. Thank you for joining us today. And welcome Geetanjali, welcome Daisy. Much awaited session, as we can see from the audience. After the pandemic, this is the time when we are back to our normal schedule, though it doesn't really feel like winter, does it? It's so warm now. And, but we are happy to be together on the Victoria grounds again. And I think I'll start off by congratulating these two wonderful artists on the Booker International Prize. Can we have a round of applause for that? Stupendous achievement, and we are so proud. I know that this is a book which has engaged critics and readers equally. And something that I wanted to start with was, again, I've heard a lot of discussions about that, the title. So, Ret Samadhi Geetanjali, would you like to say something about the title?
You want us to start with the fight that we had?
Yes, please.
Actually, we never had a fight. We are very, very amiable, amicable people and good friends. Well, first of all, it's wonderful to be here, and what a setting, you know. It's amazing. Thank you, and thank you for being here. About the title. See, mostly I think I've had a very, very mature and sensible and healthily detached approach to my work being translated. So I've sort of gone along with the translator. Once I have faith in the person, we've had all kinds of discussions, we've talked about things, but I've basically let them be the ones who are going to decide on how to say things. Except in the case of this title, and where I was defeated. Let me tell you the end, right in the beginning. So in Hindi, it's called Ret Samadhi. And in English, she and the publisher, hatched this plot that they're going to call it Tomb of Sand. And I insisted for some time that tomb does not do justice to what I'm trying to say, that Samadhi is not a tomb, that Samadhi is about a transcendental state which one reaches after being in meditation, in prayer, in repose. But one of the strongest arguments they had, which kind of made my voice go a bit weaker, was that there's a certain sort of prejudice about literature coming out of the East, and if they have a word like samadhi in the title, I wanted the word samadhi to be there. I said it's there in the English dictionary, but even if it is not, let them learn it, I said. But both the publisher and Daisy felt that when people walk into a bookshop and see something called samadhi something, they're going to think here's something on, yoga and on Eastern meditation and so on. And they didn't want that to happen with the book. They wanted it very much to be like any other book of literature. So that made me feel maybe they had a point. In any case, I was up against two very strong women, so I think I gave in. But Daisy also consoled me and said that we let it be Tomb of Sand, but in the work, she let Samadhi and what it stands for come up again and again. so people will know very well
Yes, the
what
book
it means.
does that a lot. And there has been a session on translation uh, about, uh, about resonance of one language crossing over the dhwani. And this is a book for which that is very important, because the words, more than the sense, besides the sense, it also has to be heard, and we hope to do a little bit of reading later on. But I cannot cross over to anything else without talking about the translation part at all, and I'll come to Daisy about that. Any casual reader will agree that any work of translation is quite a feat. This one is a colossal challenge. I mean, did you not say, Daisy, somewhere that the author and the translator, they are like a couple in a ballroom dance, and you know, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, and everything that Fred Astaire did, Ginger Rogers did backwards and in high heels. So how high were the heels this time?
Well, I want to backtrack because that makes it sound like what I did was harder. Because remember that Fred Astaire choreographed the dance and
Right.
chose the music and set the location. So Geetanjali is Fred, obviously, and I'm Ginger because I have to follow her and backwards in the high heels. So it's a different kind of difficulty. Yeah. Yeah, so it was very difficult, and I would like to return to the title since I was the one that chose that.
I
right?
told you it's a battle. It goes on.
But I think that the title is not a direct translation of Ret Samadhi. It's an adjacent translation, and that's something translators have to do. We have to sometimes compensate. So if we can't quite get something, we try to bring it to an adjacent space. And so I think to Geetanjali, when she says tomb, she thinks marble mausoleum. But then I always argue, but it's made of sand, so it isn't a marble mausoleum. But what I like about Tomb of Sand is that it's also kind of brings you to a question. You see that and you think, how can that be? How can a tomb be made of sand? And when a title does that, it, you know, hopefully makes the reader reach out and pull the book off the shelf, because titles are also marketing. So that is part of why the publisher and I were keen on this title.
Right. A book which, in writing this, was a kind of translation. You were translating thoughts, feelings, emotions that often lie too deep for tears. You were putting those in words. You know, like you feel like किसी ज़बान में वो लफ्ज़ ही नहीं जो ये बयां कर सके. And then, Daisy, you were doing that in English. So any point you threw your hands up and said, English में ये word है ही नहीं.
Yes. I mean, yeah, there are many things in this book that don't exist in English. But we started out with, I mean, we maybe didn't start out, but at some point we made an agreement that we had to replicate the playfulness that she created. And so I found ways to replicate that in English, so it's like a mirror rather than, you know, if I had translated some things literally, it would have been gibberish because the words were together. It's more like poetry. The words are together because of the way they sound, the way they feel, they're, you know, they're cognates of one another, or they have a rhythm. So that's like poetry, and meaning is like lexical dictionary meaning is not what's important. Yeah.
Just, if I may, just take off from that, and I'm just remembering two things. One, one is what two friends had to say about the book when it came out. And they're both sort of writers and translators and people of literature. And one said, Geetanjali, you've written your most untranslatable book to date. And the other one said, and what's a translator worth if she will not take up an untranslatable book? So I think that's what the fate of this one has been, and it's been a good fate, as you can see. But the other thing, I mean, about language and cadence, since Daisy mentions that and talks about that quite a lot, I think we this is a book which recognizes it, but I think even otherwise, it's something to be recognized. The language is not just a utilitarian, vehicle to convey a message. Language stands in its own right as a very powerful entity. And this book, I think, is full of awe and admiration for language and uses it like that, or rather, Hindi ka shabd hai baratna. Use is not a right word, but it kind of lives it like that.
Celebrates it.
Yeah, so I think that's what the the relationship of the author and this book with language is.
But did you ever despair about the translatability of, can it be translated the kind of context you were writing it in? It's a very humlog feel at times, right? Bade, beti, ma. Did you think it would go well across to international readers?
I'm afraid I don't think of things like that. I don't think of translation, translators, international audience. I mean, I may have readers only this far. I may get readers much beyond that. That's all an unknown journey, and it'll happen as it happens. But despairing about things, I mean, I think it would come up more for Daisy than for me. I mean, despairing about whether this can be said. I have already said it, whichever way. I mean, however dissatisfied I might be, or however much it may just be that I'm trying to get to the point and not getting to it. I mean, that's how one speaks. Actually, you never quite say it. You're actually just beating about the bush, if you want to put it like that. So I think I did it. I've done it already. So for me, in one sense, it's over. It's for those who pick it up to despair or not about it. Yeah.
So is it why, Daisy, a 300-something page book became a 700-page book?
Well, yeah, people ask that a lot, and some people think that I added like another...
They think Daisy's written half a new book.
Yes, exactly. And I've seen people online say that they've decided not to read the English because it's so long, and they've heard it's very rambling, and so they're going to do the Hindi instead, and, good luck to them. Because
and they get a shock.
Yeah, because it's just the same book, only it looks shorter. But one joke we make is that this book is very expansive. So as it came into English, it expanded, and then it got this prize, and our lives expanded. And now we were talking about the German translation, and they were very worried about it expanding, because apparently German expands much more than English. And so to me, it reminds me of the days in lockdown when I was working on this, and I was also simultaneously learning how to make sourdough bread. And so I wonder if some of the sourdough got into the English.
It was rising and shining.
Roti se double roti.
That's a good one. But I think, this is the right tone for what I had to ask next, for a subject, and we'll come to the subject soon, the humor. You said somewhere that it's a laughing elegy which retains hope for times which are bereft of hope. And the subject itself, with a nod to Faulkner, could be As She Lay Dying. It shares so many similarities with that book. And again, we were watching something on Poe very recently, who said that a woman and death are all that you need for poetry. And you say quite the same thing at the very beginning, right? It's a woman and you have death. What else do you need? So why did you feel that women are such wombs of words in ways that men never can be?
Well, first of all, I stopped. I mean, my heart stopped when you said bereft of hope. I hope we are not at that sort of absolutely terrible point. I think we are not bereft of hope. We are despairing, but we still hope, and we are, as Damodar Mauzo said, we are fighting on in one way or another. But why are women like that? I think by extension, it would apply to men as well. I won't say that it's only women, but I think being a woman with the kind of fraught history there is, with the kind of majorly patriarchal societies we have across the world, with the kind of stories and silences women have had to, know through centuries. Just, I say in a way, just being woman is already something volatile, something political. A woman sort of standing there silently, a woman opening her mouth, a woman doing anything is something loaded and full of meanings and full of misinterpretations and so on and so forth. So I think somewhere it was that sense that nothing is, जिसको हिंदी में कहते हैं सहज, सरल, कुछ भी नहीं रह जाता है. Everything becomes something to be interpreted and something to write a diatribe against or turn into a discourse of something. That's woman. So I think that is why I got that feeling.
And Daisy, would you like to react to that? Because you've made a conscious decision not to translate male writers, right?
Yeah, I made that decision because I had previously thought that I was choosing authors simply on merit, and then I started to realize that they were all turning out to be men, and I realized that that's how things work. That's how men get published more, and that men get translated more. Men just get more recognition, and there are more men already published in Hindi, for example. So you're more likely to choose a man unless you make a conscious effort. So I put myself on a literary diet, both in reading and in translating, to only translate and read works by women authors. And again, it was because, like what Geetanjali was saying, that women's perspectives give voice to women. It doesn't mean that women's writing is better in some technical sense, but that male writing often doesn't give any space to women's voices or experiences. And there's something that, some of you or many of you may have heard of called the Bechdel test, which came out of a graphic novelist. She had a few panels where two women are talking, and they're saying, they've come out of a movie or something, and they're saying, imagine if there was a movie where two women are having a conversation and it's not about a man. And that became the Bechdel test. Like any movie or book you consume, see if anywhere in that work, and often there is nowhere, anywhere in that book do two women talk about something besides a man. And so, like, Tomb of Sand is the ultimate Bechdel test novel, because there's just so much time between women talking about their bodies, about food, their memories, their past. The men are sort of on the side, staring through the window. In fact, literally staring through the window, longing to be let back into the narrative.
Yes.
Just very briefly, because you mentioned humor, I feel it's important to speak of that. I mean, why humor? I mean, I think humor is, of course, it's very playful, and I think it's a way of living life. It's also a way of saying things. I mean, it's sometimes a better way of saying them than saying them very earnestly and humorlessly. But also, I think we must remember humor is an extremely serious thing. I mean, Charlie Chaplin is all about the most wonderful humor, and you laugh away, but he's making the most cutting points and saying it all. Yeah.
And we both take humor very seriously.
Yeah.
And is it about women of a certain age who can afford this humor? All your protagonists are women, mature women, right?
It seems the older women seem to have a greater wisdom, greater sense of humor, where the younger ones are very earnest and, full of their agonies and full of their fights, and somewhere getting serious and losing the plot.
And Here is a woman who's turned her back on the world. She can afford to do that at her age.
Yeah.
And this selfishness of the protagonist, of the female protagonist, is that conscious? Do you see her having, being done with her duties and now she can live for herself?
Well, I mean, I think it's not a conscious point that I had thought I would make in the novel, but I think it's something I do observe in life and life around me, how big a role guilt plays in women's lives, how big a role, if it's, I mean, in our daily lives we see it, we have to, can hardly say that, we have to leave this duty today to go out because I just want to enjoy myself. We often have to justify it even to ourselves, We are leaving this duty, we are leaving the child behind because, this is necessary and, they've been saying it for so long and if we don't do it, they'll be so hurt and upset. So it's almost like the lightness of life doesn't come easy. It's something heavy for women. It doesn't come easy to them. So they live a lot weighed by responsibilities
like
and
you were
duties.
saying, we tell ourselves stories.
Yeah.
So,
and we begin to feel selfish very quickly, So I think that is part of the world that I've always been observing, and it must be there somewhere in my consciousness and found its way into the book. And certainly, I mean, older women, when they no longer have a lot of those social roles to play, that's the time they can actually return to themselves, and they may look from the outside as selfish, but actually it's about, at long last, attending to themselves and their desires and their whims and fancies and, and nothings, They don't have to be guilty about it,
And when she turns her back to the world, it's like a wall, but then it's also a door to a new world. And there are lines which I'm sure many of you have read and appreciated them. I love those lines, and may I request them to just read those two lines where she's saying, "Main nahi uthungi." Can you do that, please? You have the line marked?
We actually thought
you
we
have
might.
a line, yes,
We
because
thought we
the
might-
resonance works
Yeah.
so well there, and the humor, and how it translates from this language to the other. Do you just remember a little bit of that?
Yeah, I mean, this elderly woman is lying in bed and she looks like a lot of older people look, that they've just had enough of life and there's nothing else for them to do and they're just waiting to die. So when the rest of the family comes in to try and get her out of bed and tell her, there are lovely flowers in the garden, come on, and today the sun is shining, come on, get up. So then she always says, "Nahi, main nahi uthungi. Nahi, 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 main nahi uthungi." And as we go along, that, she's carrying on saying, "Nahi, nahi, nahi." And at some point, the nahi seems to change into something else. And it becomes, starting with, "Nahi, main nahi uthungi," it gradually turns into, "Nahi, main nahi uthungi." So, ab to main nahi hi uthungi.
And that will bring us to the next question, which I think will dominate the second part of this
You're
session.
not going to let us read?
Yes, sure. We'll go with the reading to the next one. We'll cross the border, as it were. And could you do the reading now? You want to do the reading now?
We should. I don't know how
Yes, yes, we can do the reading now.
How much time do we have?
We have a little bit of time.
Okay.
We have. So Hindi first?
Hindi first.
Geetanjali, Hindi first?
Yeah. Can I stand there? No?
Yes, of course. As you want.
I hope I can see.
Whatever's comfortable.
Yeah, I hope there's enough light.
Mic live here?
Yeah, there's not much light.
You can hold the mic for her.
Yeah, she has a mic there.
Does it work? It does. So I'm just reading a playful part, which is not just playful, I hope. And it is about this elderly woman. Now she's in the house of her daughter, and that already means possible changes in her life. And the elder son with whom she was is slightly disturbed at this, and he doesn't really visit the daughter. There's a whole story behind that. I mean, his sister. But he's remembering his mother, and one of those days he decides to go that way and decides just near the flat, it's a flat out there, and he decides just near the flat that he needs to take a leak, he needs to piss. So he gets down, he pisses and jumps onto a tree to peep in and see what's going on inside. And that's the time there are lots of crows who have come to that tree for a meeting of theirs and are very disturbed by this two-legged creature. So just that little bit I'm going to read out. So he spoils their meeting. मगर कौवों की तो बिगड़ गई, मीटिंग भी और हवा भी। दूर दूर से उस दिन सब झुंड बनाकर आए थे, बरसात, पहाड़, प्रदूषण, बिल्डिंग, सबके पार। जिसने देखा उसने देखा कि है क्या बात, आसमान आज काले डैनों से ढका गया। जबरदस्त संख्या में कौवे पहुंचे थे। आयोजनकर्ता बहुत खुश थे और थोड़ी अफरा तफरी भी मची थी कि सबको कैसे हटाया जाए। लाउडस्पीकर की ज़रूरत सोची नहीं गई थी, न ही सीसीटीवी की। वो सही भी ना होता, क्योंकि मुद्दा यही था, विज्ञान के नाम पर प्रदूषण फैलाने वाली तरक्की। तो छोटे कौवों को उनसे मोटे या उम्रदराज कौवों ने अपनी गोद में बैठा लिया, जैसे कंगारू अपने झोले में बच्चे को लिए हो, या बादाम में 2 गिरी एक संग हो, या एक छिलके में केले 2 हों, या एक धड़ पे शीश डबल हो। वैसे ही एक कौवे तन पर सिर 2 उचक रहे थे और आंखें 4 हो गई थीं। टीलों पर और पेड़ पर 2 in 1 कौवे भरे हुए। पेड़ तो ऐसे सरसरा रहा था जैसे कि उसे नंगा समझ उसके अंगों पर कौवा जामा चढ़ा दिया गया है। सब मस्त हाल हवाल था, और इतनी कांव कांव के बाद भी बाहर वालों का हमला नहीं था, न आंखों से, न डंडों से, न तवज्जो से, क्योंकि शहर परस्ती की होड़ में कौवों की किसे पड़ी थी। कौवों की मीटिंग चल रही थी। बदलते मौसमों और विज्ञान परस्त इंसान द्वारा उन पर कहरती परेशानियों को लेकर मार कांव कांव हुई थी, और पर्यावरण प्रेमी परिंदों ने लिखित भाषण पंख के नीचे से निकालकर पढ़े। जो बहुत सिद्ध हस्त थे, उन्होंने बिना पढ़े धारा प्रवाह प्रवचन दिए। सभा प्रशंसा भाव से कांव कांव कर उठी, या यूं कहें कि इंसानों को महज कांव कांव लगती अगर वो सुनते, जैसे हर अनजानी भाषा लगती है, क्या हिंदी, क्या मराठी, क्या तमिल, क्या मोर्स भाषा। जबकि भाषा तो भाषा, कौवों के प्रांतों के हिसाब से प्रांतीय भाषाओं या पॉलिटिकली करेक्ट की भूल जाएं कि कौवों की ही तो बात, तो बोलियां थीं जिनमें वे एक दूसरे से लंबी चौड़ी बहस में उलझे थे। उनकी भोजपुरी, मैथिली, अवधी, ब्रज से गगन गुंजायमान हो रहा था। बहस का ज़माना कौवों में अभी बरकरार था और बेधड़क बातें हो रही थीं। ये नहीं कि अपनी समझ पेश करने वाले को चाहे अपने तजुर्बे से या अपने आदर्श में या नासमझी में फ़र्क सोच होने की बिना पर गोली मार दो। कौवों का बाहुल्य देखने लायक था। बूढ़े परिंदे जिनके काले पर सफ़ेद नहीं पर सफ़ेद से हो गए थे। स्कूल कॉलेज के कौवे, नर मादा सब खुली बहस करते हुए कि सारी कायनात उल्टी पलटी कर रखी है और हमारी प्रखर बुद्धियां भी हार खाने लगी हैं। पहले बिना बैरोमीटर, कंपस, थर्मामीटर, एग्रोमीटर, गूगल, ट्विटर के हम जान लेते बरसात बढ़ रही है, जंगली जानवर शिकार पे आ रहा है, हवा रुकेगी नहीं, 7 भाई चुप पाएंगे नहीं, चूहा शेर हो जाएगा, बादल नर्तक आदि इत्यादि। चेहरा देखकर दिल की पहचान कर लेते कि कौन पाजी तुम्हें ही निवाला बनाएगा, कौन जोगी अपने कमंडल से तुम्हें निवाला देगा। अब हमारी ये सलाहियत इंसानों ने दुनिया की हवा में दखल करके बिगाड़ दी है और अपने तो स्टेथोस्कोप, टेलीस्कोप, कोप ही कोप लेकर टर्राते फिरते हैं। हमारे बच्चों के खाने के लाले पड़ गए हैं कि तभी बेपरों वाला बेपरवाह जीव उनकी गतिविधियों में खलल डालने आन पहुंचा था। थमी बरसात में शाम का गहराता रंग था जब गाड़ी रुकी और वो शख्स उतरा और कौवा मजलिस के सामने की कच्ची सड़क जो ग्रीन बेल्ट से लगी थी उस पर खड़ा हो गया, पैंट की जिप खोली और प्रदूषण में इजाफा किया। ए अबे, जवान कौवा उठ बैठा जैसे मारेगा। कौन यहाँ आया है गंदा करने, काऊ काऊ? अरे गंदा करके इधर ही आ रहा है हमें उड़ाने। मनहूस, जवान कौवा फिर चिल्लाया। हम कूड़े से खाना बीन कर अलग कर देते हैं तो हमें कूड़ा पसंद कचरा पसंद समझ रहे हो? उसका चिल्लाना था कि सारे जवान कौवों का पारा चढ़ गया। नहीं जानता, हम चेहरा कभी नहीं भूलते। अभी बच गए क्योंकि हमारे माता पिता यहाँ शांति शांति कर रहे हैं, पर आते दिनों कहीं ना कहीं तो दिख जाओगे और सीधे चक्षु पर जो चोंच मारूंगा कि एक पांव नुकीले पंजे की तरह उठाकर अपनी चोंच को सामने निकालते हुए हवा में चक्षु चाक वार किए। स्वच्छ भारत अभियान जो चला दें, मीटिंग के संयोजक का बेटा बोला। सब ऑफिस बेरर्स यहाँ हैं, अभी ही प्रपोजल पारित करा लेते हैं और कुछ युवकों को चुनकर उन्हें कैमरा देते हैं कि जो सार्वजनिक जगहों में और प्रकृति की निरादरी में गंदगी मचाता हो उसकी तस्वीर उतारो और एक और टोली संगठित करो जो उनकी कॉपी बनाकर जगह जगह बरसाएं कि बंदा शर्मा जाए और बंद कर दे। शर्म का बाजार में अकाल है, एक दुखी काऊ हुई तो हम किसी से कम नहीं युवती कौवी हुदकने लगी कि हर फोटो पे पत्थर बांधो और सारे कमीनों के सर फोड़ो, यूं भी हमें गंजों पे पत्थर गिराने में मजा आता है। तो समझिए कि पेड़ और टीले तमतमाते कौवों से फुदकने लगे और वहीं से आवाजें उठ रही थीं कि प्लीज सब सेटल डाउन करें और नव युवकों के पास चोरी के मोबाइल, सीटियां, डमरू हों तो उनसे खेलना उन्हें बजाना बंद कर दें ताकि कार्रवाई शांति से होती रहे। पर कौवों को लग गई थी, इसी सब के खिलाफ रैली करने की ललकार उठी। ऐसी कांव कांव मची और पेड़ ऐसे कूदने लगा जैसे उस पर उग आए डबल सिरों को शिव मंगल सूझ गया और पेड़ मंडल उनके तांडव से हिल रहा है। थैंक यू।
Okay, this is the same thing, sort of, only in English. And people always ask me, was this part hard to translate? And actually, no, it wasn't. It was the way that Geetanjali says the crows just came to her, and the crow translation also came to me, or should I say the crowlation came to me. But for the crows, everything had gone awry in terms of both their meeting and the air. They'd amassed a flock on that day, flying in from far-off lands, through rain, over mountains, through pollution, over buildings. Those who had noticed them would have wondered what was going on and why the sky was blanketed with black wings. The crows had rallied in huge numbers. The organizers were quite pleased, and a bit of a hurly-burly broke out as they wondered how everyone might be squeezed in. They hadn't considered the need for a loudspeaker, nor even a CCTV. But that wouldn't have been right, as their focus was this, the problem of the spread of pollution in the name of science. So the fatter and more aged crows seated the smaller crows in their laps, like when a kangaroo plops her joeys in her pouch, or two nuts nestle in a shell, or when there are two bananas in one peel, or a double head on one torso. So too, two heads bobbed atop each crow body, sporting 4 eyes rather than 2. The mounds and trees were filled with these 2-in-1 crows. The trees rustled with wings as though the crows had thought them naked and rushed to clothe them in crowments. There was a festive air, and even with all the cawing, there were no attacks from outsiders, whether by means of eyes or sticks or unwanted attention, because in the clamor of urbanism, who really cared about crows anyway? The crow meeting was underway, regarding the horrific problems they were experiencing due to climate change and the science-worshipping humans. There was much cawing as the environmentalist birds pulled their prepared speeches from under their wings and read them out. Those who were particularly skilled delivered speeches extemporaneously. The assembled crows cawed approvingly, or shall we say that it would have sounded simply like caw, caw to humans had they been listening the way every language does to an unfamiliar ear, be it Hindi, Marathi, Tamil, or Morse code. They engaged one another in lengthy debates in their various dialects, and since it's crows we're talking about here, let us set aside politically correct questions, such as whether they were actual languages or regional crowlects they spoke. Suffice to say that the heavens echoed with their versions of Bhojpuri, Maithili, Awadhi, and Braj. The era of debate was still extant among the crows, and conversations proceeded boldly. They were not in the habit of shooting point blank at those who put forth their own understanding, whether from their own experience or their own ideals or simple incomprehension. The mass of crows was a sight to see, old birds whose blackness had not turned to white but bore a whitish tinge, high school and college student crows, male, female, all openly debating about how the entire cosmos had been thrown into a muddle. Even our sharp intellects have begun to fail us. We used to know without any help from a barometer, compass, thermometer, agrometer, Google, Twitter, that the rains were advancing and the jungle animals were coming to hunt. The wind won't stop just yet. Babbler birds will not stop babbling. The mouse will turn lion, the cloud a dancer, and so on and so forth. We knew a person just by seeing their face. Which crook will snare you and gobble you up? Which yogi will give you a quaff from his water pouch? Now men have destroyed our capabilities by interfering in the natural environment. They rush about with their stethoscopes and telescopes, croaking wrathfully, and we can't even be sure of providing for our children anymore. And just then the featherless, heedless entity arrived and threw a monkey wrench into the proceedings. The shades of evening were deepening in the abated rain when a car stopped and a humanoid got out onto the unpaved road across from the gathering of the crows along the green belt. Said humanoid unzipped his trousers and proceeded to augment the pollution. Hey, blockhead! Young jackanapes sat up like he had a mind to hit him. Why have you come here to spread filth? Caw, caw. Arre! After he spreads filth, he's heading towards us to chase us away. Jackass! Jackanapes cried again. Just because we pick out our food from rubbish heaps, you think we like garbage and trash? As he yelled, all the other teenage crows got fired up. What this punk doesn't know is we never forget a face. He'll get away with it this time because our peacenik parents are chanting Om Shanti Shanti over here. But show your face anywhere around here in the future. He raised a foot like a clenched fist, brandished his beak, and pretended to execute his eye slicer move in the air. Let's undertake a Swachh Bharat campaign for a clean India, said the son of the meeting's chair. All the office bearers are here. Let's pass the proposal right now. We'll elect some young people and give them cameras so that if anyone spreads filth in public places and disrespects nature, they can take a picture and we can put together another team to print out copies and shower them down all over the place. So these guys will get embarrassed and cut it out. Shame is in short supply these days, someone cawed morosely. So an I'll do you one better teenage girl crow began to hop about and cried, let's tie stones to all the photos and bust these losers' heads open when we drop them, because I love dropping stones on bald guys. So imagine this, the tree and hillocks began to bounce with livid crows, and thence arose voices calling out, please, everyone settle down. And those youths who have snatched mobiles, whistles, and drums, dumroos, please refrain from playing, blowing, beating, or bleeding on them so that the proceedings can continue quietly. But the crows were stirred up. A whoop arose to rally against it all. Such a cawing broke out. The tree began to shake like it was dancing the fierce dun-dove, as though the double heads that had grown on it had decided to perform a ceremony to Shiva. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for that. And of course, a good passage to read out, because this is a story which is told through so many agents. The crows being one of them, and it fractures itself into so many narrative voices. I mean, the chapters are so organic, they are like sand dunes being swept up by this huge storm of narrative. And the chapters are, you know, there are chapters which are very, very short. There are chapters which are very long indeed. And did the tale demand this telling? Did it come organically?
Yes, entirely. It came organically, and the tale evolved, the structure evolved as I went along. And if it works, then yes, that's how it had to be.
Right. And you tried to be as faithful to the original as possible, right? And but were there chapters which you felt had to be longer in English?
I never made anything longer. That's period. I never made anything longer. It may look longer, but it's the same thing.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But you did occasionally choose to retain the Hindi and give an English explanation.
Right. Especially
Yes.
with poetry, just because I know a lot of our readers are familiar with a lot of the poetry or lines from songs, and they want to know what it is. They don't want me standing in the way. So I put the original in transliteration, and then an English version for those who don't know Ghalib, or
Yes.
don't know some pop song or something like that.
Right, right. And this book is about borders, as it says at the very beginning. Borders between languages, borders between nations, borders between genders. And I think even the chapters in English, have a very thick border below the
I
number.
guess that was the publisher's choice.
It
but
was not there in Hindi.
No. There's not, the thick lines are not there.
And borders are not new to you, Geetanjali. Your thesis was called Between Two Worlds, an intellectual biography of Premchand.
I've forgotten that. Why are you reminding me? But borders are not new to anybody. They're
And
part
the French
of our
translation was called Au-delà de la frontière
That's right.
by Yanni Monto.
Au-delà de la frontière. It's called Ret Samadhi. Au-delà de la frontière.
Right, point taken. But, we are also at the border of the session and questions. I'm sure there will be many. Shall we take questions now? Yes? Okay, I can already see hands going up. If they could please have a microphone.
Good evening, ma'am. My name is Arju. Arvind Das, while writing for The Wire, has written particularly that your novel underscores the urgent need to revisit the novels and short stories in Hindi and Urdu that have dealt with the themes of partition and communalism to get a sense of the past and present. And hence the dilemma to celebrate or not the success hence the dilemma to celebrate or not to celebrate Hindi writer Geetanjali Shree's well-deserved success. Do you think this is the reason why the present dispensation has looked at your novel in such a way?
Do I think this is the reason the present dispensation has?
Looked at your novel, or means after you were facilitated in Agra, a number of people wrote how your novel was anti-Hindu. So, why do you think this has been the case, or do you think there are other reasons?
Please ask the present dispensation.
Questions? Could you please put your hand up?
Good evening, ma'am, and thank you for this wonderful session. Ma'am, this book, as ma'am has just noted, has romanticized borders in a way. Will it be national borders, borders between gender diversity and all? Ma'am, with the present discourse concerning cosmopolitanism as a central idea, where there's this inspiration of borders as a paramount romanticism comes to your like ideology or head.
I'm sorry, I never hear the last sentence for some reason.
Ma'am, with the cosmopolitanism being the paramount of the discourse in the modern day, the very idea of romanticizing border, where did you get this inspiration from? That's my limited idea.
I don't think I'm romanticizing borders. I think, I mean, if you're asking me, maybe you can also say something about this. But I don't think I'm romanticizing borders. I don't think borders are, you know, meant to be what they often become. I think the reason, there is a positive reason that one thinks of borders, and there is a whole piece in the novel which talks about, you know, what borders should mean. So borders are really meant in their positive impulse to resolve problems of inefficiency and, you know, sort of chaos, and make things a little more efficient and workable. So that is what a border is supposed to do. That is why you have a border. You don't have a border to make it something which is just becoming a wall which completely divides up two sides and becomes something which is creating problems non-stop, which is what some borders are doing. So I think what I'm doing is, or what the book is doing is, pointing to what a border means and should mean. So, you know, what happens, I mean, if, USA and Canada, there's a border. And they work, maybe it's a good administrative line, you know, and they're administering their parts much better, and they happily go this way and that. That is what a border should do. India-Pakistan border, what has it resolved? Nothing. It's wasting resources, it's wasting emotions, it's creating problems, continuing to create problems. Nothing has got resolved with this border. So I think that's what I'm trying to point to.
And I'm sure Daisy would like to add to that. But the lines that you say, those are also beautiful lines. If you read them, you will remember them for a long time. The perimeter of a person, you say, as a border, the shawl border embroidered. Daisy, would you like to add to this? No, it's right. Any other questions? Yes.
Geetanjali ji, didn't you ever think about writing Sans Samadhi, the English version, by yourself?
You mean the translation?
Or the retelling?
No, I don't have the time and I don't have the confidence.
But we are also at a, you know, beautiful border of languages, because here is a person.
And I have Daisy. Why should I even try?
And here's a person who's never studied Hindi at the university level. Here's a person who's not a Hindi is not her mother tongue, but she's studied it at the university level, and this is what she does now. So I think if it's about borders, it's also about doors and windows, like Geetanjali beautifully.
I mean, it's also about where real education is, not necessarily in the university and the schools where we go.
Geetanjali doesn't want to be a translator, she wants to be a writer, and I want to be a translator. So we have it pretty clear, I think.
Yes. You had a question? Yes.
Hi. First, for the huge success, my question would directly be to Daisy ma'am. So there are instances in the book where you've written tumult of tacky tourists. Like you were mentioning how you've tried to capture the poetry from the original text. So where do you stop the translator in you? Where do you stop the writer in you and let the translator in you take over? You know, how do you make sure that they are not overlapping each other?
I'm not sure if, translators are writers.
Yes.
Yes.
Where do you stop your style from taking over Geetanjali ma'am's style?
Because that's not what a translator does. A translator is like a medium, like we're channeling the work into a new language. And so I don't desire to take over the style with my own. I want to capture her style and convey it. So any translator you talk to, that's not, I think, that sort of desire to write something in your own style means you're not a translator. Or if you are a translator, you go write something else.
Right.
So a translator wants to capture and recreate. You know, we're like musicians playing, Beethoven or something. I don't want to suddenly turn it into my own music. I'm trying to do Beethoven.
Right. If I'm talking about the technical part of the instance I just mentioned, how could Geetanjali ma'am say about that particular line? I'm just picking out that tumescent tourist, that line. So how do you, what prompted you to translate that particular line?
Well, if almost every sentence was an interesting and complicated experience, and we discussed so much. But she's read the whole translation, and sometimes she didn't agree, and we would discuss it. But often she would, if I did something like that, she would be very amused, I think, because it's the style that she likes. It's reflecting her style.
And not many people know that the cover is also done by Daisy.
And the Hindi cover.
And the Hindi cover as well. So we have time for one last question. Please use the microphone.
Good evening. First of all, Geetanjali ma'am, we are immensely proud of you. And my question is, while you were writing the book and while you were on the verge of finishing your book, what were your exact feelings? Did you ever think this book will make it this big? Thank you.
How would I know my exact feelings at a certain point in time? I do not know. I know I was very relieved. It took me a long time to write, and I was getting very tired of it. It had become a burden, and I was waiting for that inner voice to tell me that's enough now, it's done, give it to the publisher. And when finally that voice came, I was very relieved. That I remember. I don't remember any other feeling. As for where the book is going, I had absolutely no idea. I was, when I write, I think I write without anybody looking over my shoulder and telling me how to write and what not to write. And since I exercise that freedom, I'm very ready to fail massively. So I was not expecting that it'll go in the opposite direction and become a massive success.
I think with that we'll come to the end of this session. But like the book says, there is the end and then there is a border which is waiting to be crossed. I think we will all cross into that space. And like in the inaugural session, Debnita Chakravarti Spivak mentioned how literature is about sahitya, saha, being with the subject, crossing over to the subject space. So these are borders which are waiting, inviting us to cross over. With that, we cross over to the next session. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.